Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett, and in the next half hour we'll have stories that are developing all over the world. Our top focus, of course, is going to remain Afghanistan, but first up, the headlines. The Taliban are going house to house searching for opponents and their families, according to an intelligence document for the United Nations that deepens fears Afghanistan's new rulers are reneging on pledges of tolerance. The UN raises alarm over rights violations in Afghanistan and says those who may be in danger have no clear way out. The UN Refugee Agency urges Afghanistan's neighbours to open borders to shelter refugees. Taliban men on the hunt for a journalist working for Deutsche Welle, Germany's international broadcaster, shoot dead one of his family members and seriously injure another. Amid rising criticism over the West's handling of the Afghan crisis, NATO pledges to redouble evacuation efforts. The military alliance confirms over 18,000 people have flown out of Kabul since the Taliban took the city. And the number of dead killed by suspected jihadists in Burkina Faso's Sahel state climbs to 80. That toll includes at least 65 civilians. The state's announced 3 days of mourning. Desperation is growing in Afghanistan. Millions are willing to leave everything behind to evade life under Taliban rule. We are looking at a satellite image of the Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul. Streets seen congested with cars as desperate Afghans flood the Kabul airport gates. Thousands of people have been trying to get inside the airport and on to flights abroad. Amid the chaotic scenes, at least 10 people have died and many have been injured, but this hasn't stopped people from trying to enter the airport. And so we are seeing images like this. An Afghan family passing their baby over barbed wire into the hands of United States soldiers. It's the second such incident reported in just 24 hours. The fate of children involved in incidents like this is uncertain, because nations like Britain say they won't evacuate unaccompanied children. People are still doing whatever they can to get themselves and their families onto the airfield. We have seen some US soldiers fire tear gas to disperse the crowds. Those who've survived the Kabul exodus and managed to get evacuated safely consider themselves the lucky ones, and they're now able to recount the details of their last few harrowing days. One such man is a British national who says he's grateful to the German military for getting him out of Afghanistan alive. He had fled to Kabul airport on August the 15th, along with thousands of others. Chaotic scenes unfolded, shooting triggered panic among foreigners and Afghan nationals who were waiting to be evacuated. The British businessman had been in Kabul on and off for the last 12 years. He's been describing what it was like to be at Kabul airport at a time when conflicting reports of the extent of the Taliban takeover were coming in.
Somebody told me to go towards the north gate of the terminal where the Americans and the German troops are there. It was a chaos even when I arrived there. It took me a good few hours to get myself close to the gate and shout myself out and saying that I'm a British, please get me out of there, here. So one of the soldiers just called me. As I said, it was a chaos. They had guns, they were shooting. They had no choice but to, move the crowd from there. So I understand that. Tear gas was firing all around. So one of them just got me inside, and I was in tears, honestly. So we were there for a couple of nights without food and water, and a night after that, ordinary people, they started coming into the airport without passports or anything. They looted the airport, the terminal. They broke everything that was in there, the computers, the canteens, and we were scared. We were not allowed to go out because Taliban was there, and on this side it was the American troops. So we were like, what are we going to do? Just stay here.
Well, while thousands of people have attempted to flee Afghanistan, some of those who've stayed back are becoming defiant. Stronger signs of resistance are now emerging in places, and there have been some civilian protests against the Taliban, even in the capital, Kabul.
Protests against the Taliban have now spread to more Afghan cities, and several more people have been killed at the rallies, according to witnesses, by either the militants firing their weapons or the panic and stampedes caused by it. This video was filmed by Reuters near one of the protests in the capital, Kabul. A witness in the area said that it appeared to be Taliban firing their weapons into the air. Although on Wednesday, media reported that Taliban fighters fired directly into a crowd of other protesters in the city of Jalalabad, killing 3 people. And on Thursday, a witness at a protest in the city of Asadabad said more people were killed there, although it wasn't clear if they were killed by gunfire, a stampede, or both. A Taliban spokesperson was not immediately available for comment. August 19th is the day that Afghanistan typically celebrates its Independence Day, when it gained independence from British rule in 1919. Some of the gatherings have been small in size, but it underlines the challenge facing the Taliban to govern the country and project a more moderate image. Meanwhile, dramatic new images have been pouring in from Kabul's airport as U.S. and allied forces struggle to keep the massive crowds inside and outside under control. A little girl here being lifted over the perimeter fence by American troops filmed on Tuesday. On Wednesday, tear gas as the soldiers try to keep the crowds back. Thousands of people are here. As of Thursday, about 8,000 Afghans and foreigners have been evacuated, according to a Western official. The U.S. alone says it's trying to get out 22,000 at-risk Afghans.
So what many feared after the Taliban's takeover is turning into a reality. Taliban fighters have reportedly escalated searches for Afghans who worked with US and NATO forces. The group had vowed no revenge against opponents, but a confidential United Nations document has revealed a manhunt by the Taliban. The United Nations Threat Assessment Consultants report says the group has priority lists of individuals that it wants to arrest. According to the document, people who had central roles in the Afghan military, police and intelligence units are at the highest risk, and the aim is to apprehend those individuals and their family members. The Taliban have been conducting targeted door-to-door visits, reportedly. Individuals on the way to Kabul airport are being screened. Checkpoints have also been set up in major cities, including the capital, Kabul. The Norwegian Centre for Global Analyses has provided intelligence to UN agencies, and the group's executive director, Christian Nellerman, says they are targeting the families of those who refuse to give themselves up, and he goes on, prosecuting and punishing their families according to Sharia law. We expect, he says, both individuals previously working with NATO, US forces and their allies alongside their family members to be exposed to torture and executions. This will, he says, further jeopardize Western intelligence services, their networks, methods and ability to counter both the Taliban, ISIS and other terrorist threats ahead. The report also reveals that Taliban fighters are expanding their lists of targets by contacting mosques and money brokers. New informers are also said to be being recruited to collaborate with the Taliban government. The report contains a letter from the Taliban to an individual who worked in counter-terrorism in the Afghan government, the previous Afghan government. The letter, dated the 16th of August, asked the person to report to Taliban officials to provide information about the nature of work and relationship with the British and Americans. In the letter, the Taliban also threatened to arrest the individual and his family members. The Norwegian Centre for Global Analysis has also warned that the Taliban may target or arrest remaining Westerners or other foreign personnel, including medical workers, particularly if they criticise the group. All of this after the group pledged a full amnesty for all who worked with the Western-backed elected Afghan government. Over 100 guards at the UK embassy in Kabul have reportedly been denied British protection. According to reports in The Guardian, the security guards were told they are not eligible for British protection because they were hired by a private contractor. Most of the 125 security personnel were employed by global security firm WION World. Some of them have worked at the British embassy in Kabul for a decade. But now they've reportedly been given notice that they no longer have jobs. They say they're feeling abandoned by the British officials and their employers. Many have been forced into hiding, fearing for their lives. Nearly all 160 WION World employees at the embassy applied for help from the Ministry of Defence run Afghan relocations and assistance policy, a policy designed to assist people working for the UK organisation. But all except 21 translators were rejected last month. The UK move has been compounded by the apparent termination of their contracts. It's left many worried about how they're going to support their families, and many of them have been queuing up outside the gates of Kabul airport. This has caused huge controversy here in the UK, as you might imagine. In a tweet, Labour's Shadow Home Secretary Nick Thomas-Simons described it as disgraceful and an insult to people who've risked their lives serving alongside our representatives in Afghanistan. Conservative ministers, he says, must urgently U-turn on this and start living up to our obligations. Labour Party leader Keir Starmer is calling for British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab to resign or be fired. He says the Foreign Secretary has again made a dangerous blunder and should be sacked by the Prime Minister if he doesn't quit. Dominic Raab has been facing a backlash after reports of a delayed help to Afghan interpreters when the British Foreign Secretary was on holiday as Kabul was falling. The opposition's accused Dominic Raab of putting the lives of hundreds of interpreters at risk. The Foreign Office says there is no legitimate basis to prevent civilians from travelling to safety. The Foreign Office also says it's monitoring the situation and says it's in close contact with the firm that hired these security guards, WION World, to provide any assistance. Meanwhile, more than 100 guards performing similar duties for the US Embassy under a separate WION World contract have been evacuated. Many others left in Kabul are receiving support from the US Embassy. Well, the Taliban's actions in recent days have damaged what hopes there were that the group might have changed its ways in the last 2 decades. On taking Kabul, the Taliban made claims about letting bygones be bygones, allowing women to study and work, and allowing independent media to continue as well. But actions on the ground don't currently appear to support those words. Several media watchdogs have reported incidents of Afghan journalists being beaten, harassed, or their homes raided. There have been cases where women journalists have been turned away from work. But Afghanistan's journalists don't want their lives and their work, much of which has been brave over the last 20 years, undone in less than a week.
Women's rights and free speech have been hard-fought gains in Afghanistan over the last 2 decades of war. When last in power in 2001, the Taliban had barred women from holding jobs. But in what would have been unthinkable back then, a female journalist interviewed a Taliban spokesperson earlier this week after the group secured power in the capital, Kabul. In their first press conference since capturing the city, the Islamist militant movement said Tuesday it would allow free media and jobs for women. But some journalists aren't convinced. Saad Mohseni, who heads the largest private broadcaster in Afghanistan, told Reuters on Thursday it's too early to tell what the Taliban's policies will be.
The laissez-faire approach is more a reflection of not having enough bandwidth than a specific policy that they would allow media to carry on business as usual, as they have been over the last 2 decades. So I wouldn't get too excited. It's only been 72 hours. I mean, since they took over the city, and it just their senior officials are just arriving in Kabul, now.
The Taliban spokesperson said on Tuesday that media must not work against Islamic values and that women could work, quote, within the framework of Islam.
It's interesting that some of them are interviewed, they refuse to look at the woman, they look at the camera person. So it's they do it, but they do it in a way that you can see that they're uncomfortable. Whereas the guy in the studio the other day was sort of a senior, one of their senior outreach communications person, was quite comfortable looking at the presenter.
Media watchdogs have reported incidents this week of Afghan journalists being beaten, harassed, or raided at their homes. In one example, a presenter on state-owned Radio Television Afghanistan, Sahar Nasari, wrote on Facebook that members of the Taliban took his camera and beat up his colleague while he was trying to film a story in Kabul. He said, quote, "It has become clear there is a gap between action and words." A Taliban spokesperson did not respond to a request for comment on accusations that it has harassed journalists, and particularly women in the profession.
Well, now we'd like to tell you about a former captain of Afghanistan's women's national football team, who has asked all her fellow players to burn their jerseys as fear and uncertainty grips Afghan women after the takeover by the Taliban.
They are so afraid, they are worried, they are scared, not only the players, but also the activists, that they have nobody to go to seek protection, to ask for help if they are in danger. They are afraid that any time the door will be knocked. We use football as a means of activism to stand for our right, have a strong stand against Taliban. We will use the same football pitch that you used for execution, public execution, and you used to shoot one of our sisters in the penalty area. We will kick the ball from there, and we are standing strong. Today, I'm calling them and telling them, take down their names, remove their identities, take down their photos for their safety. Even I'm telling them to burn down or get rid of your national team uniform. And that is painful for me. In 2020, in summer, there was a league, women's national league in Kabul, where all these girls from Mazar-e Sharif, from Bamiyan, from Herat, flew all the way to Kabul to compete in the National League and play there for 1 week of the tournament and the league. It was the most beautiful thing to witness, to see the growth, to see all the time and dedication we have had, the first generation of football players. That is what we were very proud of. And today what we are seeing after the country has been collapsed, all those achievements, all those dreams is just faded.
Moving away from Afghanistan, Burkina Faso is once again reeling after a jihadist attack. The death tolls mounted to more than 80, 59 civilians, 6 pro-government militiamen and 15 military police have been killed.
Une très grosse attaque qui a visé un convoi sécurisé par la FDS et qui comprenait donc beaucoup de civils, femmes, hommes et enfants qui cherchaient juste à rentrer à Arvinda. Que dire, c'est encore une fois présenter les condoléances aux familles de ceux qui nous ont devancés dans l'au-delà.
The impoverished state of Sahel in Burkina Faso has been struggling with Islamist insurgency for some time. The attack occurred when Islamist militants raided a civilian convoy that was being escorted by military police near the town of Arbinda. The location is in the so-called three-border area where the frontiers of the 3 countries converge. This is where gunmen linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State are known to roam. The government says the military put up a strong fight against the terrorists as 58 of them were shot. The government offered congratulations to the defence and security forces for the action. It's the 3rd major attack on Burkina troops in just the last 2 weeks, reiterating the difficulty the country's armed forces have in confronting what is a highly mobile foe. Since the start of August, more than 90 people have died in attacks in the north and northeast of the country. A school in a small remote fishing hamlet of Sotomo in Chile has been chosen for a pilot project run by billionaire Elon Musk, chief executive of SpaceX, to receive free internet for a year. Starlink, a division of SpaceX, aims to roll out 12,000 satellites as part of low Earth orbiting network to provide internet services all around the world. The focus of the project is remote areas where terrestrial infrastructure struggles to reach.
In the small fishing hamlet of Sotomo, Chile, more than 600 miles south of Santiago, 7-year-old Diego Guerrero travels by boat to school each day with his dad, Carlos, the two often battling wind and rain to get there. It's a remote existence, with Sotomo itself reachable only by water, its rocky coastline dotted with brightly colored wooden and tin houses inhabited by the hamlet's mere 20 families who make their living catching mussels and fish to sell at market some 5 hours away. But on a recent day, Diego and his schoolmates found themselves connected to the world in a way they could never have imagined. Their school was chosen as one of 2 places in Chile to receive free internet for a year, part of a pilot program run by billionaire Elon Musk. Using tablets provided by the Education Ministry, the school's 7 pupils can tap into online learning, watch films, take virtual museum tours, and make video calls to children in other schools.
Now we can play on tablets, do homework on tablets, and those sorts of things. Every day the teacher lends us tablets to find homework as well as games so that we're not bored.
The program is run by satellite company Starlink, a division of Musk's SpaceX, which aims to roll out 12,000 satellites to provide broadband internet services around the world with a focus on remote areas. The signal is received via a satellite dish installed on the school's roof, which transmits through a Wi-Fi device to most of its facilities. Eventually, the plan is to extend it to the rest of the hamlet. It only works from noon to midnight due to a limited supply of diesel for the generator that supplies power to Sotomo. Nonetheless, it is a significant upgrade to the patchy mobile internet signal that residents currently can get on their phones by leaning out of windows or paddling out into the bay. Diego's teacher, Javier de la Barra.
And then the surprise, the expectation, and now the joy to have this. Hopefully, it continues to provide results as it has been doing, and for it to now be finalized.
Diego, whose favorite subject is math, wants to be a sailor, but his father hopes his son's new window on the world will help broaden his horizons.
Diego will probably also want to start streaming WION Live Broadcast via YouTube each day at this time. That's all we have on today's episode. For more global news and updates, do stay tuned to WION World is One.
This is right, Arab.